When I worked in Yonkers and Grayson, I looked at all of the hungers and sufferings that were in the community. And it was AIDS, it was homelessness, it was people without jobs, it was people without child care, there were all kinds of issues. So I worked on doing something about it. If one experiences the interconnectedness of life, the oneness of life, then the sufferings of life are calling out to be dealt with. That's what the gate of sweet nectar is.
The most important point of the Gate of Sweet Nectar for me personally is to learn how to make offerings and to receive offerings. The Gate of Sweet Nectar addresses the hunger, the thirst that we all feel. And whatever dimension that we feel it, we have all kinds of thirsts and hungers. And so in doing the gate, my experience is that I open up to these thirsts, to these hungers, and to the hungry ghosts in my own being. And in reciting the gate responds.
One of the things the Gate of Sweet Nectar can do, and if you allow it to do this, is to broaden your perspective into a kind of universal perspective. So you're inviting everything that's suffering, that's dissatisfied, that's needy, within yourself and anything around you in your immediate community or family, and then in a broader context into society.
The hungry ghost covers a wide range of territory. And we talk about the hungry spirit as anyone who's in the cracks of our culture, anyone who's sort of excluded from the mainstream, who we may be ignoring and not providing for, not caring for. And then we extend that to our own hungers, you know. Your hunger, my hunger, whatever it is I'm thirsting for, feeling that I need, you know, there's that kind of needy quality, can never be satisfied, you know. So it encompasses, the hungry ghost encompasses all of these beings, all of these realms.
One of the things about the Buddhist cosmology is you can look at it in a kind of stricter formal way, and we talk about these 6 realms. And the hungry spirits are beings in this realm. And sometimes they're depicted as beings with enormous bellies and sort of pencil thin necks that they can't get anything down there to satisfy this huge belly, this huge hunger that they have. And that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is that it's a dissatisfied side of yourself. It's your own greed, it's your own anger, it's your own propensity towards delusion.
In the illustrations, the pictures that I've seen of hungry ghosts, you know, you have these little beings and they're very bloated and very thin necks, you know, and they're starving. And of course, it's impossible to take anything down. And their hair stands all straight on end, you know, because they're angry.
The basic point of the service dates back in the days of Shakyamuni Buddha to a service for people that were in hells. And then as the years go on, the service takes the flavor of being a liturgy for people that are suffering, for people who have been forgotten. For many reasons, there are people for whom liturgical services should be done but aren't being done. And the service takes on that flavor for all of those. And in particular, it's very important in Japan as a service for the ancestors. I took that flavor, what sort of grabbed me, because I was very interested in social action, was looking at the aspects of society that have been forgotten or on purpose neglected, and then looking at individuals and at the aspects of individuals that have been forgotten or on purpose neglected, and said I would like that service to be for them.
Calling out to hungry hearts everywhere through endless time. You wander, you thirst, I offer you this Bodhi mind.
Part of the reason why the Gate of Sweet Nectar appeals to the Zen Peacemaker order, and especially to Bernie Glassman's work, is that it's all directed into social action. What Bernie tried to do, or what he did do in Yonkers, was to create permanent shelter for people coming out of homelessness, an AIDS clinic, a bakery that provided job training and jobs for formerly unemployable people. And a lot of the aspects of what he was working on had a kind of social action thrust, and its primary purpose was to raise the Bodhi mind in these communities. And that's the primary purpose of the Gate of Sweet Nectar. It's to raise the Bodhi mind. And the Bodhi mind's a very specific thing. It's the mind in which you put everybody else before yourself.
Gate of Sweet Nectar. Buddham Saranam Gacchami. Dhammam Saranam Gacchami. Sangham Saranam Gacchami.
In the Gate of Sweet Nectar, there's a few very important elements. There's the themes of feeding the hungry spirits. But first you have to bring them here. And one of the ways you have to bring them all here is for you as the participant of the service to connect with all of the aspects of life. So one of the early parts of the liturgy is really inviting the participants to become one with the universe, thereby bringing the spirits.
Sangha in the 10 directions, the being one with all the formless forms throughout space and time, being one with the great Manjushri Bodhisattva, being one.
I experience it as the arising of great love. And the ultimate offering is this great love of life being completely one life, being completely interconnected. And from this place, I open up to offering not just to the hungry spirits or to those who I might see as living outside of my own realm, but to everything, to all of life. So for me personally, the gate is really about learning how to invite in all these hungry parts of my being and beings of others, and then to feed, how to respond.
Attention. Attention.
Raising the Bodhi mind, the supreme meal is offered to all the hungry spirits throughout space and time, filling the smallest particle to the largest space. All you hungry spirits in the 10 directions, please gather here. Sharing your distress, I offer you this food, hoping it will resolve your thirsts and hungers.
During the Gate of Sweet Nectar, you watch the officiant, and they're engaged in several different mudras through the progress of the service. And a mudra is just a hand position that the officiant takes. And the mudras are ways of invoking energy. So there's a mudra where your hands are like this, and there's another one where your hands are like that. There's one where your right hand's like that. There's one where you snap your fingers. There's one where you invite the hungry spirits like this. All of those mudras are designed to create a kind of energy field and an energy experience for the officiant to embody the 5 Buddha families.
I further pray that in receiving this meal, all your sufferings will be eliminated, and that you will be liberated, so that being joyously reborn, you will play freely in the fields of the Pure Land. Raising the Bodhi mind and practicing the enlightened way, you become the future Buddhas without any further regress. Those who realize the way first, please vow to liberate all others throughout all space and time. I further beseech you to sustain me day and night.
And it's part of the visualization of the 5 Buddha families, and it's also a way of invoking the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas and the guardians of the Dharma, as it were, to come and join the service.
In offering this meal, I pray that you give its merits equally to all creations in the Dharma worlds. Please transfer the merits of this offering to the Dharma world of true reality, to unsurpassable enlightenment, and to all the Buddha wisdoms. With all our love, with all our spirit, and with all our might, inviting misery and suffering no longer, we vow to accomplish the way. May all creations in the Dharma world swiftly accomplish the Buddha way together. No bo bo hori gyari tari tata gyataya. Being one with the unconditioned Tathagata. Om bo te riyatari tata gyataya.
You'll see the officiant do the mudra, but they'll have the robe over their hand. And one of the reasons that's done is so that they're not copied. And one of the reasons they shouldn't be copied is because they're incredibly powerful.
Sanvara, Sanvara, being one with all Tathagatas and Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, please nourish and sustain us. No makusoro payatata yata yata nyata om soro soro hara soro soaka. Being one with the inconceivable body Tathagata, let the nectar of Dharma spring forth. No makusan manda botananban, 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 no.
When you offer food to the hungry spirits, what you're doing is enlarging the meal so that it can satisfy everybody and everything that needs satisfaction. And it's a way for one person or a group of people to address what they think are the needs of the world around them. And in the case of Catholicism, we transubstantiate this bread and wine into the body and blood of Christ. And in the Gate of Sweet Nectar, it's actually very similar. There's a kind of transubstantiation where this limited meal, this rice offering that the officiant's going to incense and then offer up as an expression of the raising of the Bodhi mind, actually is enlarged during the service. And it's enlarged in a universal sense so that anybody can come and get it.
No makusan manda botananban, no makusan manda botananban, no makusan manda botananban, no makusan manda.
So obviously when we first look at the service, we look at it as a Buddhist service. And I was saying, okay, how do I make this service a service that feels comfortable to people in different religions? And then also, how do I make this service comfortable to people who aren't religious, who claim not to be religious, who feel they're atheists or agnostics or whatever? How do I make it open to everyone? I'm still exploring that. I'm still looking at changes that will enlarge the audience of the Gate of Sweet Nectar without losing the audience that has come to it because it's a Buddhist liturgy. And how far can I go in changing things, taking away the Buddhist flavor to make it a universal flavor, versus keeping flavors of different faiths in it.
Being one with all Buddhas, I turn the water wheel of compassion. Being one with all Buddhas, I turn the water wheel of compassion. Being one with all Buddhas, I turn the water wheel of compassion.
I had a discussion with my teacher who said that in Japan, the Japanese Soto version that came from the earlier version that dates back to Shakyamuni Buddha, that was changed tremendously, in bringing into it Shingon aspects, a lot of imagination and creativity. And my teacher said this is a new era, and it's a. He saw that I had a real affinity for the text. He said, feel free to change it in any way. So after that, I started to make some other radical changes of bringing in text from other religions and other sensitivities.
Roshi GLASSMAN had worked with Maezumi Roshi on the translation over many, many years. And Maezumi Roshi had encouraged him to bring the gate into now and enliven it and make it really a powerful practice for us that would Help us to live in the world as it is today.
Being one with all Buddhas, I turn the water wheel of compassion. Being one with all Buddhas, I turn the water wheel of compassion. Namu Taho Nyorai no Bobhagyabate.
One of the ways to look at the five Buddha families is to say that it's a way of organizing your own universal perspective.
Being one with all Buddhas in the unifying spheres.
Things that have to do with connecting your life to other aspects of other people's lives, unifying your life, other parts of the culture, that all fits into that Padma family. That's a way of bringing things together in a kind of connected way. And when you take a kind of formal approach at organizing all of those things, you're reflecting on them, you're looking at them anew, you're looking at them differently, and it'll change the way, hopefully, that you relate to yourself and relate to others. So when the officiant's performing the ritual of using the mudras and then approaching the altar and coming back to the top of the bowing mat that the officiant stands at during the service, what they're really doing is embodying the mandala, right? And a mandala is like a model of the universe. And in this particular model, there's these five Buddha families that we're going to call into being. And they're called into being each time you do the service. And they're really just different sides of ourself. So there's this unification family that we call into being, and the livelihood family, and the Buddha family, and the study family, and the karma, or the social action family.
Being one with all Buddhas in the formless spheres, bodies overflow with boundless Dharma, and our light is fulfilled. Being one with all Buddhas in the formless spheres, bodies overflow with boundless Dharma, and our life is fulfilled. Namuko Hakushin Yorai no Bobhagyabate Viho Ragyatara Yatata Yataya Inkoko Dayon Jikijuho. Being one with all Buddhas in the study spheres, throats are open and eating and drinking fully satisfied. Being one with all Buddhas in the study spheres, throats are open and eating and drinking fully satisfied. Namudi Fudi Nodai no Bobhagyabate Abba en Gyara Yatata Yatayaku Shitsu Jodi Gakishu. Being one with all Buddhas in the service spheres, all sufferings of the hungry spirits are healed. Being one with all Buddhas in the service spheres, all.
It's almost like a play. There's an introduction of the Buddhas. They're invoked. They're called in. There's this raising of the Bodhi mind that takes place. There's the invitation to all the Tathagatas, right? The Buddhas of all the different realms to join us. The Bodhisattvas are invited to join us. Then the five Buddha families are invoked, which means that each Buddha from those families is invited and embodied by the people practicing in the service. Once all of those elements are clear, then you've raised the Bodhi mind and you acknowledge that. Then there's the communion aspect, which is what this phrase, Om Bojishi Tabodaha Dayumi means. I am the Buddhas and they are me. It's a communion with the Buddhas at that point, where you're surrendering your own identity into the identity of the Buddhas.
Om Bojishi Tabodaha Dayami. Om Bojishi Vadayami. Now I have raised the Bodhi mind. Now I have raised the Bodhi mind. Now I have raised the Bodhi mind.
So the gate has an energy of celebration. You know, this is really like a happy, incredible thing. And of proclamation, you know, because we are declaring that we have raised the Bodhi mind and that I am the Buddhas and they are me. Those are very powerful statements to make, you know, never made casually. And these proclamations really change your being, changes the way you are in the world.
I am the Buddhas and they are me. 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 By this practice I sincerely wish to extend all my love to my own beings, friends, enemies, family, and community, and to all creations for so much done on my behalf.
And then you dedicate the merits of everything that you've just invoked and kind of experienced in body and spirit, and you're dedicating the merits to the different aspects of society around you that you feel need attention. You give the merits back to the Buddhas, back to the Bodhisattvas, back to your family, back to your community.
May all creations in the three worlds receive loving benefactions. May those suffering on the three paths come to atonement and be cleansed of all their ills. May they be liberated from samsara and arise in the Pure Land together. The Buddha turns the Dharma wheel, and so reality is shown in all its many forms. All suffering sentient beings are liberated and brought to great joy.
And in our case now, there's also a spontaneous merit dedication that's done where the head chanter will just decide to dedicate the merits that day to victims of suicide bombing, victims of the war and terrorism. And that kind of keeps it fresh, that experience. It keeps it real and it keeps it connected to a larger world. But basically, what the real energy gets down to, if I was going to describe it or try to articulate it, it would be, what can I do? How can I help?
We also dedicate these merits to the victims of war, starvation, oppression, to those who gave their lives for their country and for the peace of the world, to all who died before birth, to all beings in the various realms, to the countless spiritual beings who are starved for the Dharma, to those in the lower realms of existence, and to the evil spirits and those who hinder the way. May they be satisfied with our offering of the Dharma, cultivate right wisdom, liberate all beings, and allow the seeds of wisdom to flourish forever. This is our life, the length of our days. Day and night we meditate upon it. This is our life, the length.
But it's not about me helping someone else. it's from this place of the practice of the gate, I recognize that me and this other person are not separate, you know, that our lives are completely intertwined and completely together. So for me to do anything to help anyone is really not the point. The point is to establish the connection, to that with which I'm afraid, or which I see as something not quite me, not quite of my world, you know, not willing to let that into my world. So just establish that connection to say, yes, you know, our life is together. It's one life. And together, you know, together we'll go through this gate.
It's not an altruistic experience, it's a pragmatic experience of acknowledging that your own enlightenment and your own spiritual well-being is dependent upon the enlightenment and the spiritual well-being of the people around you. It's not going to happen in a disconnected way. Nobody gets to go first. You know, nobody gets to step through the door, the gate of enlightenment, before others. It's not possible.
Day and night we meditate upon it.
When I first started to work at Graceland, I realized that when I was much younger, I had made a few vows, and one of them was to live in the streets. And working in Yonkers, I was going to work with the homeless, so I felt, well, this is the time. I'd forgotten about that vow. And I said, this is the time to do that, so I wanted to go live in the streets. And I brought some people with me. And each day we would gather and sit together and talk about what was going on with us. And then we'd disperse into little groups, beg for money, beg for food, and then come back. And during one of the times when we were sitting together, somebody said, I think we have to thank all the Buddhas for what's going on. And then somebody else said, yeah, but it's not just all the Buddhas, we have to thank all of the beings for what's going on. But those are two lines out of the Gate of Sweet Nectar. And then other people, they didn't know the Gate of Sweet Nectar. Other people said things that were exact lines out of the Gate of Sweet Nectar. And so I realized that the Gate of Sweet Nectar was also the liturgy that had to be used on the streets. And when I came back home, it struck me that my life was living out the Gate of Sweet Nectar. And I therefore realized that that was my theme song. It was just all about my life. And it's remained my theme song.
Calling out to hungry hearts You who wander, you who thirst, I offer you this Bodhi mind, calling out to hungry spirits everywhere through endless time, calling out to hungry hearts, all the lost and the left behind. Gather around and share this meal, your joy and your sorrow, I make it mine.